Hello and welcome back to the Wandering Cantos. Today we're going to be continuing our series on the Quintessential Quintuplets. And today we are looking at Volume 4. So if you haven't seen my previous videos on Volumes 1 through 3, check them out now. We'll be sort of continuing our discussion that we started in those episodes, so I highly recommend them. And if you like this type of content and want to be notified when the next episode is released, please consider subscribing to the channel. And if you're new here, the purpose of this video is to treat this manga the way you would treat a literary classic in a high school or college English class. Basically, that means we're going to take a look at the plot of each chapter, do a little character analysis, and then study things like character psychology and theme. As always, I want to take a brief moment to acknowledge that there will be spoilers for volumes 1 through 4 in this episode, but we won't be spoiling anything from the future volumes. Also, since it's a busy time of the semester, this video is going to be focusing on the chapters 24 through 26 specifically. We're going to divide this one into 3 parts basically, and I'm kind of excited about this change. I think it will hopefully make these videos a bit faster and more digestible. With that being said, let's jump right into it. So, I want to start with a brief recap. So, in the last volume, Futaro almost lost his job tutoring the Quints, but at the very last minute, Nino covered for him. As a result, everyone was looking forward to taking a brief break in order to participate in the school trip. When Futaro's sister suddenly falls ill, however, Futaro almost misses the trip. The Quints, however, show up with their private car to drive Futaro to the camp, and this is where Volume 4 picks up. So, Chapter 24, The Binding Legend, First Day. Chapter 24 starts with Futaro and the Quints stuck in traffic. In order to pass the time, they play games, and Futaro is in surprisingly high spirits. He reveals that he hasn't spent a night anywhere beyond the Quints' house since elementary school, so he's pretty jazzed about this trip. Due to the weather, the group has to spend the night at an inn. Unfortunately, there's only one small room available, and they'll all have to share. Nino is super against this, but notably, Itsuki defends Futaro from Nino's baseless accusations. While sharing a meal, the group discusses their plans for the upcoming trip. Ichika and Futaro get a bit embarrassed when the dance is brought up, and Miku seems sullen by this. So, you know the trope where the two main characters in a romance rent a hotel room only to find out that the room only has one bed? This chapter sort of has an interesting twist on this trope. So, basically, since the Quints have to share a room with Futaro, they have to figure out who will put their futon next to his. In the end, however, they decide to basically keep their choice anonymous so Futaro won't know. Effectively, they all just, use their twin magic to look identical. But in the end, this ends up being pointless since he's already asleep. In the morning, however, Ichika draws close to Futaro and watches him sleep. Itsuki, however, catches her in the act, though we find out soon that she doesn't know which of the Quints was with Futaro. And that brings us to Chapter 25, The Binding Legend, Day 2. So, Chapter 25 begins with everyone at camp. Nino impresses everyone with her cooking abilities, Ichika is popular with the boys, Yotsuba is having fun chopping wood, Itsuki is struggling with the precision of making rice, and Miku is experimenting with the food by adding a secret ingredient. Futaro meets up with the guy who tried to ask Ichika out, and despite his somewhat scary appearance, he seems like he's actually a decent guy. Meanwhile, Nino gets upset when the boys burn their rice. However, it's notable that Futaro can tell that she's upset while the other guys can't. It's a good moment to show just how close he is to the Quints at this point in the story. Yotsuba offers to help Futaro with the test of courage. It's notable that this is sort of a contradiction of her personality, but also sort of isn't. So basically, she usually can't say no to helping people, but today she's asked her friends to handle her work so she could help Futaro, even though he didn't ask for help. So is she helping someone by helping Futaro? Yes, but she's also abandoning work she would normally not be able to say no to. So Futaro and Yotsuba have fun with the test of courage, and Yotsuba observes that Futaro is having fun and that the life has returned to his eyes. Ichika and Miku stop by, and when Ichika gets close to Futaro, Miku gets visibly upset. And when Futaro sort of comments on Miku, being kind of curt, Yotsuba disregards Miku's reaction and tells Futaro that she's always like that. So Itsuki and Nino also go through the test of courage and are easily scared by all of the jump scares. Along the way, however, Itsuki deduces that Nino wasn't the girl she saw with Futaro in the morning, so she's starting to narrow down her list. Meanwhile, Miku tries to get up the courage to confront Ichika. She's conflicted because the sisters have always shared and got along, but now Miku feels possessive, even though Futaro is technically everyone's tutor. Nino gets lost on the trail and finds Futaro, who is still wearing a wig for his costume since, he's dressed up for the test of courage. And it's love at first sight since she thinks that he's the boy from Futaro's photo. That brings us to chapter 26, The Binding Legend, Day 2, Part 2. So Futaro doesn't realize that Nino doesn't recognize him, so he's thrown off by her shy reaction. Eventually, he catches on and decides that it would be easier to play along with her rather than give her more, blackmail ammo. However, in order to try to discourage her affections, he pretends to want to smoke and break the law. This obviously backfires, however, since that just makes him all the more desirable to Nino. As they walk through the woods, Nino almost falls off a cliff, but Futaro saves her. She then saves him from falling off the cliff, and they end up collapsed where it's safe. Nino asks Kintaro, which is Futaro in disguise, to hold her hand and to dance with her at the bonfire dance. Itsuki then shows up, lost, alone, and crying, and Nino runs to her. When she turns back to Kintaro, he's gone. And that wraps up our, summary for chapters 24 through 26. So I want to get into some of my thoughts on it. So far, there's been some very interesting setup for this class trip arc. So Itsuki now has to solve the mystery of which girl was with Futaro. Yotsuba has been enthusiastic about spending time with Futaro specifically, which feels different than normal. Miku is processing her feelings of jealousy and might confront Ichika. Ichika still has feelings for Futaro, so will she stand up for herself against Miku? And Nino has now joined the team of girls who are in love with Futaro, although hers has an interesting twist in that she doesn't realize it's Futaro. And then so for a bit of analysis, these chapters primarily serve as the setup and initial rising action for the school trip arc. However, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the psychology of what is going on with the characters. So Ichika has feelings for Futaro, but feels like, as the big sister, she has to sacrifice her feelings for her sisters. Furthermore, she suspects that Miku had feelings first, so she's sort of going off of the philosophy of, first come, first serve. Itsuki wants to like Futaro and even defends him at the inn when Nino tries to act like he might be creepy. But she's still suspicious of his intentions, so she seems to have a hard time truly trusting outsiders. And Miku loves her sisters and is used to a life where they all share and make things equal. Therefore, she's struggling with her crush since part of having a crush is wanting the person all to yourself. As a result, it's not that she's conflicted about liking Futaro, it's that she's conflicted about what this affection will mean for her relationship to her sisters. So with that being said, that's going to wrap up this sort of, rapid fire, look at 3 of the chapters. So if you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and don't forget to subscribe. And I want to include some questions for the comments since I always love, discussing things with all of you in the comment section. So why do you think Yotsuba is so enthusiastic about this trip in particular? She's kind of acting like it's like, the last trip before, someone dies kind of thing, where it's like a last hurrah, if that makes sense. How is Futaro going to get out of having to dance with Ichika, kind of Miku, and now Nino? So kind of Miku is because Miku was dressed up as Ichika when she suggested dancing with Futaro. So it's very confusing, but she's technically, in the lineup for the dance. And what do you think will happen when Itsuki realizes that it was Ichika with Futaro this morning? So those are my questions, and I'd also like to hear in the comments if you liked this sort of faster version where we're only looking at 3 chapters at a time. I'm kind of interested in doing this moving forward, but I'd love to hear your feedback. But with that being said, I'm going to wrap this one up, so take care, and I will see you in the next one.